Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Do you want to learn about new Knick Chuma Okeke? Yeah, he might be the 15th man, but he might have something to add to this team. I'm going to get into it right now with a very special guest on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube or both to make sure you never miss an episode, because we're here for you guys. Probably gonna be more like 3 days a week now for a month or so. Not as much to talk about, but any breaking news, anything that happens with the Knicks, we always got you guys covered, so you never want to miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at strick.land, and I'm joined today by Philip Rossman-Reich, my buddy from Locked On Magic. So we're gonna talk about Chuma Okeke, who came over to the Knicks on an Exhibit 10 deal, was reported, which means probably a training camp deal. There's a chance maybe they look to retain him as that 15th man on the roster if he shows out during training camp or something. If nothing else, they'll get to pay him more to play for the Westchester Knicks, which seems like a little bit of a fall from grace for a guy who was a mid-first round pick in 2019. But I think there's some interesting stuff to his game, which I'll get into with Philip right now. So let's not hold things up any further and get right into that discussion. All right, and it's crossover time. I am joined by Philip Rossman-Reich of the Locked On Magic podcast, and I'm getting the skinny on Chuma Okeke, who the Knicks just signed. Name I was somewhat familiar with, Philip. I saw the name and I was like, oh, I recognize that guy. Like, he was a mid-first rounder. I remember, after his rookie year, it seemed like there was something there. And then I was like, oh, kind of bizarre that his rookie deal just expired and now he's available to reach the Knicks on an Exhibit 10 contract, which is effectively a training camp contract. And then I started looking in the stats and I'm like, oh, geez, like he kind of fell out of favor there. So I guess before we get into that and why that happened, if you were going to just describe him to me in like a couple paragraphs or whatever, a relatively small pitch or just the crash course on Chuma Okeke, where are we at this point in his career 4 years in?
Yeah, it's still potential. And I think, when the Magic drafted him in 2019, they knew they were getting someone that they were investing in long-term. Because if you remember, Auburn made the Final Four that year, but Chuma tore his ACL in the Sweet 16, I believe. And so he missed his entire true rookie season. And even on top of that, from what I understand, he was starting to play 3-on-3 and getting ready to ramp up to 5-on-5 when COVID hit and shut down everything. And again, that put a stop to everything. But the Magic drafted him knowing he'd get sort of a gap year in the G League. He looked okay there, played his rookie year, had some really promising flashes in that rookie season in 2021, and then just never really kind of hit that potential again and never really kind of found his footing. And there are a lot of reasons for that. He had, I think like 4 games into his rookie season, he had like this knee contusion or this shin contusion. This bone, it was a bone bruise actually, now that I'm remembering, in that surgically repaired knee. And the Magic got very, very cautious and they kind of shut him down and brought him back slowly. And it just felt like it was a series of injuries that, would be 2 steps. It would be 1 step forward, 2 steps back because of an injury. As good as Jamal Mosley has been for the Orlando Magic, and obviously second in Coach of the Year voting last year, got the team to the playoffs, like been a really good coach. Mosley never really used Chuma in the same way, and in the same way that was successful that Steve Clifford did. Under Mosley, Okeke became almost exclusively a three-point shooter. And while he is a capable three-point shooter, as Knicks fans may remember from the January game this year, on the Martin Luther King game this past season, he is a capable three-point shooter. It really didn't allow him to play to his full potential. He is an excellent mid-range shooter, an excellent post-up player when given the opportunity to do so, but he just never could kind of put all those pieces together again. He had a real, again, his rookie season, he had this really strong game in Los Angeles against the Clippers, an upset win for the Magic at the time, when he had like 3 or 4 steals in the fourth quarter and was just this really kind of dogged, physical, versatile defender, could guard guards and guard bigger forwards. And that's always been kind of the attractor with him, is that he has that versatility. He's just never quite been able to put all the pieces together. And, unfortunately, injuries kind of put him behind the 8 ball, and the Magic changed and evolved. They got Franz Wagner, they got Paolo Banchero, Jonathan Isaac came back from injury. He just started getting buried further and further down the depth chart, and he couldn't get himself back in.
Yeah, and Knicks fans certainly remember, if you want to talk about standout games, he had one against the Knicks this past year. Random 25.5-minute performance where he shot 5 of 7 overall, 4 of 5 from 3, had 15 points against them. So maybe that made a bit of a stamp on the Knicks ownership and Knicks front office to go ahead and try to get this guy in the offseason if he became available. I am kind of curious, you look at his field goal percentages and stuff, and they're pretty bad. I mean, it's not a pretty picture. And that's always the first thing I go look at. I'm like, oh, like, how this guy shoot, whatever. And, it's like the quickest way that you can start getting an idea of how a player is going to help you out on offense, at least. But like, you look at his numbers, and 41.5% from the field his first year, 35% from 3-on-3 attempts. Okay. Fine. And then 37.5% his second year, 32% from 3, we'll say, 35% from the field his third year, and then 30% from 3, and then 36% this past season from the field, and 28% from 3. But then you start digging more into it, and this guy, it seems like, for someone who is, I feel fairly confident saying, not a great 3-point shooter at this point, you look at his shot logs, and that's like all he took. Like,
yeah.
And I think that sort of boils into what you're talking about, where it seems like Mosley had a different idea for him. Do you think that the issue at this point with Chuma has been that the role that he's been cast in is just doesn't jive with the player that he is? And if that's the case, then how, if you were the Knicks, would you go about trying to fix that?
Yeah, it's a chicken or an egg problem, really, because, you say all those stats, but you also look at the minutes per game, and his minutes are also decreasing, going from 25 his first 2 seasons to 19 to just 9 last year. So you're not getting volume. You're not getting kind of the consistency. And Okeke will still have games like he had against New York. I mean, like he had against New York on Martin Luther King Day, where he hits a bunch of threes in a hurry, and you see the potential. You see, like, that's what Chuma Okeke can be if you give him the time. But yeah, it was hard to say because he couldn't get into a rhythm ever. It just came down to, he got passed on the depth chart. The team became more invested in a guy like Caleb Houston coming off the bench, or, obviously Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner come on the team. They're more important. Jonathan Isaac is a more impactful defensive player than Chuma can be. And so some of it is, yes, Chuma didn't play because he shot poorly, and that was the role they designed for him. But he also didn't shoot well because he's not playing and not able to get into a rhythm. And you look at maybe some of the games where he did play a little bit more. I'm going to quickly stall to pull that up. He has games where he shoots well. He played a game in Miami, January 12th. That was like right before that game against the Knicks, because everyone on the Magic was sick that road trip. He had 16 points in that game and made 4 of 8 3-point shooting. So it wasn't necessarily some isolated thing. Game against Sacramento, January 3rd, he had 11 points on 3 for 4 shooting. So he is plenty capable of, if you give him the time, you give him a little bit of runway to get some minutes, he will get into a rhythm and make some shots. The question, though, is the Magic kind of made that exclusively what he is, and they didn't give him the runway to shoot, to find that rhythm. And maybe that's on him for not earning that opportunity. And maybe that's on the Magic for not kind of being patient with a young player. But again, they they, as happens with teams that get a lot of draft picks, you get a lot of draft picks, you have new young guys to invest in, and Okeke kind of got lost in the shuffle. He is very capable of playing in an NBA rotation. It's just whether you have the patience to, it's whether he takes advantage of the opportunity when it comes. And it came around for the Magic, obviously, in January when everybody was sick on that road trip. But he also has to take advantage of that opportunity when it comes, and the team has to be willing to see him out. And that's obviously a harder thing to do, especially in an NBA where mid-range jumpers and post-ups are kind of the provenance of the stars. Chuma Okeke is not a star. He's got to make threes to be effective, especially on a title contending team like the Knicks.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And let me tell you guys a story. I wanted to go to a Mets game with a couple of my friends, and there's a cool promo next month that I want to hit. I'm not going to say which one. I'm going to gatekeep a little bit because I want to make sure I get it. But the cool promo next month that I wanted to make sure I could try to get. And so I hit up a couple of my friends, and we were like, oh, yeah, let's check it out. And I was like, I know just the app, and I checked it out. We're getting in 100-level seats, right field, right near all the good food, $25 a person. And that's before I even use the promo code, which I haven't gotten into yet. So let me tell you guys how to save even more, as if that doesn't seem like inexpensive enough tickets for you. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yeah, I think he's got a decent situation, at least in training camp. Some good guys to sort of pick the brains of. Certainly, he's got some phenomenal shooters to learn from if he wants to improve his three-point shooting, and OG Anunoby and Dante DiVincenzo and Mikal Bridges, all these different guys. And then if Okeke is good with the the defensive end of the ball, or wants to learn more about that, you certainly have OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, all kinds of guys to sort of learn from there. I question whether he'll end up on the Knicks for sure. I think maybe he's treating this as an opportunity of like, okay, they showed interest in me, good situation. Maybe they're promising him, like, hey, you can go and star on the Westchester Knicks this year. If you sign somewhere else, then tough for us, I guess, but like we'll treat you well as we can and try to get you in our system, because I do think the Knicks are now starting finally to look at things through the perspective of there's these aprons and we have a lot of guys that are going to get paid. Gavin and I just recorded an episode that preceded this one that, was all about the Julius Randle extension potentially and what that could mean for the Knicks going forward. And
I'm talking about it on my show, and the Magic just got over the cap for the first time. Like everybody is thinking about it.
Yeah. And it's, it's one of those things where if you have guys that are making under market value, eventually rent comes due. And we're probably going to see it in the next year or two. Like even a team that demolished the NBA this year in the Celtics and was able to keep all their guys might realistically only have one more year left to try to win a championship with that core, and then just have to say, we're too hamstrung at this point. Like we need to trade guys so that we could start bringing in younger talent to this roster again, because pretty soon, no matter the results of their season, they're going to end up with the last pick in the first round. Because if you go over that second apron for too many years, you automatically get the last pick in the first round. All these different penalties, all the money that they're going to have to spend, everything else, it's just going to get to be astronomical. And the Knicks are sort of staring that in the face right now. They have this roster that Jalen Brunson was nice enough to take a pay cut on. Julius Randle maybe will as well. We'll see in the coming days, weeks, months, whatever. They have Mikal Bridges already sort of lightly putting it out there that he's going to take a pay cut. And maybe they're already looking at a guy like Chuma and saying, hey, in a couple of years, we might need to entertain.
Yeah. And to that point, like, he's coming on Exhibit 10. Like usually you'd spend an Exhibit 10 on a rookie or someone that is more suited to play in the G League.
Mhm.
Now you're spending an Exhibit 10 and potentially a 15th roster spot on someone who, say what you want about the 4 years of experience that he's had with the Magic. He's got 4 years of experience playing and a lot of times playing some meaningful minutes for the Magic. Like, yeah, he's coming off the bench, end of the rotation, but he's played in important games. He's played in big games for this team, and he stepped up in big games for this team. And while, I think, you look at the numbers and you say, oh, there's a reason why Chuma Okeke didn't play. I don't think anyone's pretending otherwise. But for the Knicks specifically, he is someone that will defend. And I think, we all know a Tom Thibodeau team, you have to defend first. You don't see the floor if you don't defend. Chuma Okeke gives them another 6'8" forward that they can throw at a Jason Tatum or throw at a Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner if need be. You need to kind of collect some of those bigger bodies. And, even if you're playing Okeke for 5 minutes or you need him for that week and a half stretch when, OG, God forbid, sprains his ankle. OG has an injury history. You might have to plan on missing 10 to 15 games. Those 10 to 15 games, Chuma Okeke can come in and fill in at least admirably, and you'll get maybe 2 or 3 of those games, like we talked about that he had at Madison Square Garden in January. The Magic got a few of those games this year from him. He was important in that win over the Knicks. He was important in the overtime loss to the Kings and the close loss to the Heat when everybody on the roster was hurt. That kind of veteran leaders, that kind of veteran, and it's a young veteran, but that kind of veteran know-how from your 15th guy on the roster, that's going to be invaluable because getting through an 82-game season is really tough. You're going to need everybody at some point.
Yeah, there's also a part of me that wonders if the Knicks are just collecting former role players off of all their enemies to get strategy or something. I mean, the Magic played the Knicks really well this year. And I wonder if the Knicks are looking at like, hey, this team is going to get a year better, whatever. Let's bring this kid in. Let's pick his brain all training camp, siphon what we can off of him. And, then offer him a spot on the Westchester Knicks if he wants it, or potentially offer him the 15th roster spot. I will say with regards to the Exhibit 10 deal, the Knicks are an interesting case study with those. They don't quite treat those deals like most teams do. And I note this every single offseason for the Knicks, but they just use those deals like monopoly money to just pay their G League players more money, basically.
Yeah, like, that's what they're supposed to be used for.
Yeah. But they do it to a comic extent. Like they'll just pull guys, and it's like they have for a solid week and change, they'll have sometimes 2 guys per day that they sign and cut.
Yeah.
On these deals. And
I would note too with those Exhibit 10 deals, teams also sign guys to do pickup runs in their facility do pickup runs in their facility before training camp. So, you need some extra bodies. You throw those guys in there. There's a lot of reasons to sign an Exhibit 10 deal. It's the fact that we care about these contracts, this stuff probably was happening long before we started caring about it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. There are the Magic do that occasionally where they'll sign a guy to an Exhibit 10 and then cut him the next day, even like before he plays in a preseason game. It, like you said, it's all to give guys a little bit of extra money before they play in the G League or play elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that's the Knicks' plan. Maybe they're trying to, maybe they're just doing that as a contingency. Like, hey, just in case, we cut this guy, and maybe they'll just guarantee his contract, give him that 15th roster spot. I do think that they're being a little cautious with that spot this year because they still have the $5 million taxpayer mid-level that they can spend at some point, and that becomes prorated the longer they wait. I think after the trade deadline, it becomes prorated and decreases all the way through the end of the season. I think that they maybe want to use that on their 15th spot, but there's just not a good player available right now. So maybe this is just their opportunity to keep their options open.
And to correct me if I'm wrong, you can use mid-level exceptions in trades now.
To my understanding, you can use the non-taxpayer
in the room. Okay, the taxpayers don't get that benefit.
I think that gets axed for the taxpayers.
I'm new to paying the tax.
Yeah.
Like the Magic will be paying the tax in 2 years. I'm still learning those rules. We haven't had to pay the tax since Dwight. I'm preparing myself.
It's honestly new on the Knicks too. Like they've managed to skirt just under it for so long, and then they're now just diving headfirst into the deep end. They can't get to the second apron this year because they've been capped by the new rules. So they've been told explicitly they can only be a first apron team this year. But next year and beyond, stands to reason they'll probably start looking at potentially dipping into that second apron. So we'll see how things end up going there. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I guess as we keep rolling on Chuma here, and don't get too deep into cap nerdery, although I could all day. So if you ever want to just talk about that, granted, it's really hard to keep up with these days.
It's hard. I'm still learning all the new rules. I was trying. I was trying to, like, the Magic had cap room this summer, and I was trying to piece together how they did their cap math. And I know they still have their room mid-level exception, and I just was like, how did they do this without using the room mid-level exception? And I called Keith Smith from Spot Trackers, just like, you need to explain this to me. I can't do the cap math. And he's like, yeah, it took me like 3 times to figure it out too. Yeah. But they did find a way to not use the room mid-level exception.
There you go. I mean, that's pretty sick.
It's math. I was told there would be no math. That's all I know.
Sometimes you just sit back and wait for the math to come to you rather than trying to figure it out yourself. By the way, speaking of math, you know what? I'm going to give you a quick shout out before we finish talking about Okeke one more time. But I got to give you a shout out. I remember you and I executed a trade in one of our Locked On NBA mock drafts, and I traded you Isaiah Hartenstein, and you traded me like pick 11, and I think it was Chuma.
I think I traded you Chuma. Yeah,
I think Chuma was in this deal, and I got pick 11. I took like Jordan Hawkins. You got crapped on endlessly by everybody, including David Locke.
I got crapped on by Magic fans too.
And Isaiah Hartenstein is a $30 million center now. So I just got to give you props for your eye for talent real quick. I wanted to make sure to shoehorn that one in, and we're a little off the rails right now. So it's perfect.
No, let's get back on the rails. I have a point about Chuma Okeke I need to make sure I make to you. Chuma Okeke is absolutely beloved in the Magic locker room. That is a guy, like, I know we like to look at stats and think about players on the court. There's an off the court element that matters sometimes too. Vibes matter with these teams. You're with these guys for 6-7 months. Like, it matters. Chuma is a pure vibes guy. Everybody in the Magic locker room absolutely loved that dude. Not just because he is already has rap albums. He's in the studio a lot. But he is very, like, I think we were joking about this before we recorded. He is not a big talker. You're not going to get a lot out of him. But everyone in the Magic locker room said when Chuma speaks, it is the funniest. He says the funniest things. And some of it might be them ragging on him a little bit, and he'll take it. But a lot of it is he is genuinely a funny guy and just beloved in the Magic locker room. Like, there's like some legitimate concern with the Magic, not that they're losing Chuma Okeke, the player, but they're losing a really key locker room glue guy for them this year in Chuma, as well as in Markelle Fultz, who's still bouncing around free agency. If anybody wants him, sign Markelle, please, somebody. But Chuma Okeke is just genuinely a beloved dude in that Magic locker room, and I don't think that means nothing.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
If that double negative makes sense.
No, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I mean, it's certainly something that powered the Knicks along last year. We joke and call them the power friendship Knicks, because it's just, they just doubled down on it this offseason and said, hey, let's get Mikal Bridges in here. Let's just get all these Villanova players together and
super friends.
Let them all be super friends. They'll put the power rings together and
got the wrong shirt on for the super friends.
There you go. And everybody just has a good time on this team. So that would certainly fit right in. And I feel like what you just described reminds me of Mitchell Robinson, to be completely honest. Not very outspoken, but when he speaks, it's hilarious. So
Yeah.
I'm sure those two would become fast friends if Chuma ends up on the Knicks, which brings me to my final thing that we can go over here. Not the longest episode, but honestly, it's 15th.
It's August.
On the roster. Yeah, it's August. It's a 15th man on the roster, whatever. I think the thing that I'm most curious about is, what do you think? I don't even know what do we do? A percentage chance, a 1 to 10? Take your pick, whatever scale you want to pick. What are the chances you think that this guy ends up sticking with the Knicks? And what are the chances that you think that, you know what? Let's not even make it sticking with the Knicks. Let's just say, what do you think the chances are that Chuma 5 years from now, this is harsh, but is still in the NBA and is a productive role player and has reached some form of NBA competency going into about his age 30 season and makes an impact and manages to stick in the league?
Yeah, those are two different questions. I would say this. I think there's probably a 2 in 3 chance, 66%, whatever you want to call it. I think Chuma Okeke should be on an NBA roster still. Just second draft, new situation, new environment. He is a talented player. He's shown that he can produce on an NBA floor. Whether he can do it consistently over an 82 game season or over 15 minutes per game, that's a fair question to ask. But he is someone that I think is an NBA player still and can contribute to a quality team like the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks are probably hoping to be in a tier above where they were last year. But look, Chuma Okeke played important minutes and impacted games for the 5 seed Orlando Magic last year. So that part I don't think has completely gone away. And I think Chuma should be on an NBA roster next year. Now, 5 years from now, do I think Chuma Okeke is going to be on an NBA roster? I think those chances drop pretty low, like 1 in 4, 25%, whatever you want to say. He's got to have a breakthrough season. Like, he's got to have a season. He's got to find an opportunity where he is playing a lot and producing. Honestly, Chuma, I think, would be like a great fit for a team like the Jazz or, a quasi rebuilding team that can give him opportunity to play. The Knicks, I don't know the ins and outs of the Knicks roster or the depth chart, but I imagine the Knicks will give him a role that's very similar to what the Magic were giving him and the kind of opportunities that the Magic were giving him. And there will be some opportunities there. Like, their injuries happen. It's part of the game. 82 games is a long time. I tell my listeners this all the time. If you got a guy 1 through 15 on your roster, you're going to need 1 through 15 at some point during the season. Everybody's going to get their opportunity, and it might be very small, but you gotta trust those guys to take advantage when that comes. And with how tight the Eastern Conference is, every game's going to matter. Like I don't know how you feel about this. I think 2 through 7 in the East is going to be determined by like 2, maybe 3 games, 3 games at most. We're going to have a wild game 82 again. And so I think Okeke can contribute this year, but 5 years down the road, he's going to need to find an opportunity somewhere. And maybe that is, if he wants to, going overseas, playing in Europe, playing well in a European league for a high-level EuroLeague team. I think he can do that, but he's got to find opportunities. He's got to take advantage of it. And while I think he can help the Knicks in the short term, I don't think he's a long-term play for a team. Your 15th guy, you're cycling through all the time. You don't really want the same 15th guy every year. But he can play now, in limited minutes and limited opportunity. Whether he could take advantage of that and swing that into a bigger chance, that's on him. That's going to be on him to produce when that time comes.
Yeah, I think to me, just eyeballing it with him, it just seems like he needs to find every NBA player that's a role player has one thing that they're known for and that they're good at. And it seems like he just hasn't quite found the one thing that he can hang his hat on yet. And he's got to find that, whether it's
all that
three.
It's all that word I said before. It's potential.
Yeah.
He's always been this kid, I don't know if y'all, if you remember that NCAA tournament run from Auburn, it was wild. I think it was Chuma. I think it was Bruce Brown was on that team. They came out of nowhere, and Chuma was the unquestioned star of that team. And then he tears his ACL. and he's just never been able to get back to where he was at Auburn. And the advanced stats loved him at Auburn. Like everybody said, if he's healthy, this is a steal of a pick for the Magic. He's just never been able to kind of sustain health while that opportunity window was open. And, you know, you're the 16th pick in the draft. That opportunity window closes pretty quick if you don't take advantage of it.
Well, we'll see if his window stays open or closes with the Knicks, or if he ends up playing for Westchester this year, if he ends up with some other NBA team, perhaps it catches someone's eye while playing preseason with the Knicks and ends up on another team's roster full time. Either way, very intriguing guy. I'm intrigued to see in preseason and see what he brings to the table, to see if he could potentially be that breaking case of emergency 15th man, which Knicks fans know, just like what you said, very valuable after having a very injury-plagued back half of last season. So, Philip, thanks so much for coming on, for giving me the scouting report. And now you and I both, man, just sit back and wait for this training camp in a couple months, and then we can start looking at these guys. But appreciate the time and appreciate the insight today.
Absolutely, man. See you in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Here's hoping.